Hello, everyone. We have with us Professor Ralph W Nicholas, who has devoted his life to research on India. Now, Professor Nicholas has been coming to India on and off almost regularly for the last 52 years. He came here first in 1960, between 60 and 62, has stayed in the villages of India, in one of the most backward villages, to be more precise. As a professor of anthropology, he has made several contributions to Indian studies in the States, United States of America. His major works consist of studies made of rites, rituals, practices, social norms, mores in certain specific areas of West Bengal, and that is where I met him. His main books have been Kinship in Bengali Culture, a fascinating book on how kinships work within social systems. Fruits of Worship, that came out in 2003, was an immediate bestseller. It contained a whole series of articles that he had published. The Rites of Spring, it's about the Gajan worship or Gajan ritual of the villages of Bengal and many other states of India. And the last one, which has just come out, is on the Night of the Gods. This is about Durga Puja. I would start by asking you a question not exactly relevant to India, but to your own country, the United States of America. As an anthropologist, how would you look at the conglomerate or at the alliance or the loose federation of social groups that President Obama has been able to garner this time to win?
I'm delighted to be here, and I really did come to talk about India, but since the American election results have been such a major item of discussion in India as well as in the United States since I arrived, I must say, first let me express my personal delight in the outcome of the election. Since Barack Obama is a sometime colleague on the faculty of the University of Chicago, and I should add that Michelle Obama also worked for the University of Chicago. She is a lawyer as well, and she worked in several capacities in student affairs and also in the University of Chicago. And the Obamas live in our neighborhood. That is to say, we all live in Hyde Park, which is the neighborhood around the University of Chicago. There's better security around his house than around our house, but we're neighbors, and it's a great honor and a rare one to live in the same locality with the President of the United States, and to see him reelected by, as you say, a very interesting amalgamation of I won't call them interests, but there are certain elements in the composition of the electorate that came together to make his victory possible this time. Last time, during his first election, there was a real groundswell of support which spread across all sectors. But the second time around, white males were not quite as enamored with Barack as some of the other elements of the electorate.
Across the board?
Not across the board, but his attempt to appeal to the middle class, which he did repeatedly during the campaign, didn't appeal to the white male middle class, but it did appeal to the white female middle class. At the same time, of course, the growing Spanish-speaking sector of the American population appreciated the efforts that he's made. They didn't think that he'd made all the efforts they wished for, but efforts to secure a better standing for Hispanic people in the United States.
And other minorities.
And other minorities. African Americans have always been pretty solid behind him, even though they also are critical of the fact that he has not been notably a spokesman for African Americans while he's been in the White House. He's been more a spokesman for all of the American people. It was a difficult election, but he won those critical states which put him over the top in the electoral college, that was the task that he had to perform, and he performed it very brilliantly. I think that it appears that to this day Karl Rove doesn't believe that really happened. So, and if we have disappointed Karl Rove, I'm delighted.
Now, coming back to India, that was where I thought I should have started. Is you were here in 1960 to 62 in an Indian village, living with nothing to distinguish you from the normal villagers, using their facilities as well. Now, you've been there again, I think, between 68 and 70. From the 60s to what you see now, 2000 to 2012, how much of a difference can you perceive? I mean, apart from what all of us see, in the attitudes, in the traditional attitudes of Indians that were deeply rooted within the psyche, in adopting to change.
The number of people who have left rural areas all over India to go to cities is very large. The reduction of the proportion of the population that is rural has gone down about 15% over the years that I've been working in India. Now, that still leaves a very large proportion of the population in rural areas. And rural areas tend to be more conservative in all respects than urban ones. People who are translated from villages to cities are obviously separated from their ancestral homes. They're separated from the family obligations which they would normally be fulfilling if they were still living in the village. They're unable, they may still consider, and usually do still consider themselves to be very much part of that village and part of that household which they have left behind. And often they're providing financial support for people who are staying there, elderly parents and so forth. But they're living independently. The family that has gone to live in Calcutta is living independently of the elderly parents. They're constructing their own lives. The wife is able to make decisions that might have been made for her by the elders in the household had she been living in the village. This just in the normal course of events is going to bring about a attitude change on the part of people who have under other circumstances lived in subordinate roles and now are feeling themselves to be able to make autonomous decisions about family size, decisions about education, decisions that would have been made by collectivities had they remained in the village. At the same time, of course, the villagers are getting some benefit from people who have gone to work in the city. They feel the financial rewards of more highly paid occupations. People who have adequate incomes in the village don't leave. They stay there. If they have enough farmland, they have one of the activities that's very popular in the area in Midnapur where I worked was pond cultivation. It's a very intensive form of agriculture. It doesn't take much land, which is great if you have very high population density. You have a small plot of alluvium that you can feed oilseed cake into. You can grow a very productive pond garden. So people are getting better incomes from intensive forms of agriculture.
Did it contribute to retention of people back in the villages?
No, I should have taken up this subject because, of course, some of the families that had been quite prosperous under the old regime, that is to say, who had been large landholders back in the 30s and 40s, and who found themselves with much reduced land holdings frequently put some of their resources into educating family members and finding middle class urban occupations for them. And some of the families that I know rather well have really relocated their principal financial or economic activities to Calcutta and other cities, the Jamshedpur and
the nearer ones,
Asansol, into industrial areas where they have had middle class occupations in offices and occupations that require a good education. And they have then reinvested some of their earnings in the ancestral homes in the village they use them as country homes, as rural retreats, places to go for the pujas and to go and relax. But they have also upgraded the standard of living in the village in the course of their urban migration.
The other one that I was referring to is the almost complete merger in terms of mind and mobility between the village and the city. Going from your village of Kelomal to Calcutta was an event in itself. Now people just go in the morning and come back by the evening. All over India this is happening. The TV, including our own, Doordarshan, the radio, Akashvani, FM, that's got into almost every household.
Right.
So urban-centric thoughts, behavior, demands, consumerism has been injected rather forcefully into what was earlier the isolated village.
True.
How much do you think that this urbanization, the globalization of thought, behavior, attitudes, aspirations, how much do you think it's impacted on the traditional pillars of village society? Let me be more specific. I'm referring to caste, I'm referring to gender, I'm referring to respect for elders or upper strata.
Well, of course, as you know, there's a lot of variety among people in this respect. I've found some people who probably never thought so much about caste in their everyday relationships with people. It's there. It's a well-known fact. Everybody knows everyone else's caste. They don't. There's no.
Not in the cities.
In the village.
In the village, everyone.
In the village, everyone knows. Of course, in the city, it's very difficult to tell unless you can get hold of a piece of information, a surname or some giveaway. But no, I'm talking about the village and I think that the effect of television on the people whose lives are led in the village, who don't really have an urban end to their life. I think the effect of television has been very powerful. I see people talking about things that they never would have thought about talking about before. And of course, they used to listen to the radio. I mean, Akashvani, All India Radio Calcutta was part of their lives. And
Kolkata Ka.
Yes, Calcutta Ka was part of
I know.
part of life, and but television has had a very different and more profound effect on people, and I find the children doing Bollywood dances instead of the kind of things that
So the local
kind of amusement that the villagers used to have have been replaced by things that they've seen on television.
The gods and the rites surrounding the gods. Don't you see a distinct standardization of worship? The local gods who were so important even till 15 years ago are being replaced by pan-Indian or pan-state, all-state deities.
Homogenized.
Homogenization.
You know, there's certainly an element of that, but at the same time, the modern media cut in the other direction as well. And on the one hand, I was really surprised to find Santoshima in the village.
You're right. So new gods, godlings.
She was definitely a migrant from North India.
But she came in.
On the other hand, the influence of the film Tarak Nath Baba on the
Baba Tarak Nath.
Baba Tarak Nath, on the
so there's been
migration.
reinforcements.
People started making the pilgrimage to Tarakeshwar more frequently after they saw that film, and the film had the effect of reinforcing something that you might consider to be a rather traditional kind of undertaking. So it cuts in both directions.
It cuts both ways.
Yes.
So there are these local gods and godlings that take charge of the village, and there is a certain amount of respect for them all over India.
Gender. Women have the coming out into public life of women has taken place gradually, but it's taking place, and I think that the capacity of women to express their rights and to resist the kind of abuse and treatment which was once commonplace. I mean, I hate to think about the subject.
No, but you've seen it, so let's be frank. You're an anthropologist.
Yes,
you've seen what used to happen.
There was wife beating and the abuse of young brides and so forth, and I think that this is diminished.
You were in the Council of Overseas Research Centers of America. You have been president, and now you're chair of the American Institute of Indian Studies. Now, these two bodies have been concentrating on research by American universities and scholars on India. Would you like to say a few words there?
Yes, the American Institute of Indian Studies is an organization of American universities that have programs of teaching and research about India. It was formed 50 years ago by a group of scholars, you know, those of us who are devoted to Indian studies in American universities. At that time, there were 12 member institutions 50 years ago that formed this consortium to obtain funding to support research by American scholars in India in order to promote the study of India in American universities. The organization has grown over these 50 years, and we're extremely proud of what we've accomplished. We've sent more than 2,000 scholars to do research in India over this period of time.
On all subjects?
On all subjects. As my colleague Pradeep Mahendratta likes to say, everything from anthropology to zoology. So we've supported research on geology, and we've supported a lot of research in the social sciences and humanities, a lot of work on Indian language and literature, Indian arts. Edward Dimmock is one of the former presidents of the American Institute. Edward Dimmock was a professor of Bengali at the University of Chicago.
His work is still referred to.
Oh yes,
both in Bangladesh and Bengal.
Yes, he was a very influential person. He really is the person who introduced Bengali language and literature in American higher education. And he had a personal influence on me. He was the person who caused me to choose Bengal as my place of research back in 1958. And he did it by the simple act of offering to teach Bengali if someone wanted to study it.
Okay.
So I said I would be his student, and I was the first one. There were many more who followed me, but I had that pioneering opportunity to study with him.
But you have equal amount of focus on, let's say, Hindi, Tamil.
Hindi has been available in American universities for a much longer period of time.
Hindi has been the primary.
And Marathi became, I think Marathi was offered at the University of Pennsylvania quite early on. Tamil, of course, was also offered fairly early in the development of Indian studies.
Urdu.
But then some of the other languages, it took a little while to take off. Now you can study most Indian languages in the United States. The American Institute of Indian Studies, however, offers instruction in India in Indian languages for American students. And we offer them in the places where the languages are spoken, so that the students who come to India to study Indian languages are able to do their studies in localities where when they walk outside. So they study Urdu in Lucknow, and they're able to then
Sanskrit in Benares.
Sanskrit is in Pune.
Pune.
Yes, Pune actually is the place where we teach Marathi, Gujarati, Sanskrit, and Pali.
Okay.
And then Kannada is in Mysore. Malayalam is in, I never know whether to say Thiruvananthapuram or Trivandrum.
Said it well.
Tamil is in Madurai.
Madurai.
Yes, very beautiful location.
Okay. Now coming to American interest in India, there is a distinct shift that we see in the last 20 years or so from away from India to, let us say, our neighbor China.
Mm-hmm.
China seems to be more exciting to the American students, and I'm sure it will come out in statistics.
It does.
Why is India losing interest? Or putting it the other way around, why are the American scholars and universities finding China a better place?
Americans have not lost interest in India. I mean, as you can see, we have 140 students studying Indian languages in India at the present time. I mean, this is a serious expression of concern. We have more applications for research fellowships for India than we can deal with. But it's also true that China has drawn much more interest. And in terms of American undergraduate study abroad programs, the statistics just came out. And the number of American undergraduate students coming to India to do a period of study is around 4,500. The number going to China is around 14,500.
4,500 versus 14,000.
Yes.
That too with a language.
About 10,000 more going to China for
10,000 more. That I guessed right.
And yes, and it's true. And I think that
why does it happen?
The Chinese, well, and mind you, 4,500 is not an insignificant number if you consider that when we started out, there was one undergraduate study abroad program in India. That was the University of Wisconsin College Year in India program. And now the American Institute of Indian Studies provides services to something like 35 American college programs in India. So the growth in Indian studies is really visible.
Do you have any suggestions for Indian students in anthropology in India, and students that you keep seeing as a top grade American professor in the States? Are they mini ambassadors or are they mini Americans?
I must say that the students, the Indian students whom I come into contact with, a couple of really outstanding young MPhil students in Calcutta whom I've been trying to get into good programs. And I think that the natural inclination of most students when they set out to get doctoral degrees in anthropology is they plan to come back to India. But the fact is that
they start comparing
experience in the United States says to them, I'm going to have a more fulfilling career if I stay in the United States. And they'll earn more.
Earn
That's
more.
That's part of fulfillment, isn't it?
Part of
I think you have to give a little credit to that too. But
We had that in Indian society as well.
yes, I think that the opportunities that the United States offers will seem more attractive, but on the other hand, as I look at the experience of my academic colleagues in India over the last 52 years, I see the standard of living of my Indian colleagues has improved so dramatically that their ability to do the kind of work that they want to do has improved wonderfully, that life for academic people in India is a lot better than it was
Than what you saw.
in the early days of my experience in India. And I think that this is a trend which I hope will continue.
Thank you, Professor Nicholas, for sparing your time and for carrying on better understanding at the people-to-people level. Government to government will always be different. What matters to people, to the man in the street, is how I view my friend across the seas. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the invitation, Jawhar.
Thank you.